Hello everyone! On today's episode of Linus Love Does Something Crazy at High Stakes, we have a heads-up hand nabbed from the High Stakes forum on 2+2, played at 5100 on PokerStars. So we have Linus Love in the small blind here versus Corvin 87 in the big blind. So let's get into the action. So Linus Love opens for 2.5 big blinds and he gets 3-bet to 11 big blinds right off the bat. Flop comes Jack 6-2 suited. And Corvin continuation bets for a quarter of the pot. Linus Love makes the flat. Turn comes the King of Hearts. So quite a interesting barrel card for our big blind here. And Corvin bets about 70% of the pot here on the turn, setting up shoves for the river. But Linus Love doesn't let him get to it. He shoves on the turn for the entire stack, and Corvin 87 calls it off. And when they flip it over, we find Corvin has the combo draw with the King Queen of Spades. Pretty standard stuff, but Linus Love ends up shoving here the Queen Jack with the Queen of Hearts. So shoving the middle pair in on the turn here. So this type of shove is something that would probably never occur to me to do in practice, but we'll have a look at some GTO plus simulations to see what the equilibrium thinks about it, and maybe we can glean some insight onto why Linus Love is choosing to shove this kind of hand. It's an obvious kind of equity denial type of play when you shove over a c-bet on the turn, or you might call it a protection bet type of play here. Obviously here on the turn there's a plethora of draws that the big blind can have, with both straight draws available, gut shots, and both flush draws. However, it is also very apparent that big blind will be holding a bunch of overpairs and a whole bunch of King X that you'll just be value owning yourself into. So let's have a look. Right, so here's the first sim that I made in GTO Plus to look at this hand. It's just to get a handle on things using a lot of different bet sizings here to see whether this 25% C-bet and polarization bet 75%, like large bet sizing on the turn, is kind of the dominant strategy at equilibrium here. Now, if you're not as familiar with heads-up play, I like to think of it kind of like a button versus big blind type scenario in 6-max. Just the ranges are quite a bit wider. So here's a big blind 3-bet range, including a lot of mixing at low frequency, some of this offsuit garbage, a bit of polarization with these middling suited connector hands, a lot of pocket pairs, some Queen X garbage, that kind of thing, lots of Ace X. And then the in-position range, this is Linus Love's 3-bet calling range. A typical 3-bet calling range, just a bit more wider than you'd be used to in a 6-max situation. So if we look at the results of the sim, we can see that the 25% c-bet strategy is kind of the dominant frequency here for out of position, the 3-better, with a larger sizing kind of carved out here for Queen, Queen, and Ace Jack. Predominantly those kind of most vulnerable, very strong hands that big blind has in his range. So we'll end up simplifying this just to a 25% c-bet strategy in the next sim. And if we bet 25% pot, get the call, see the King of Hearts turn, the dominant strategy here is the large bet sizing and just setting up stacks for a river shove on the King of Hearts. So it makes sense. We can, with this information, kind of confidently make some simplifications to our betting tree and deal with a much smaller sim. So we'll go to the simplified one. And here I'm just giving out of position 25% c-bet size, then kind of 2 sizings on the turn, and then we'll have 3 river sizings, but we won't look at that really, and 2 sizings for out of position on the river. High stakes rake, and we're off. So if we're just employing a small c-bet strategy here, out of position can c-bet nearly his entire range. and LLinusLLove will be flatting a lot of things. So here, the Queen Jack is pretty easy, just straight flat. Since the c-bet size is so small, there is a small raising range that LLinusLLove can put together here on the flop, like 7%. Things like Ace Jack, King Jack getting in there, Jack 10 with the combo draw, as well as some nut flush draws, that kind of thing to balance it out. Bottom set, things that just want to get stacks in immediately and are kind of upset that out of position has bet so small on the flop. Those type of things you can build a raising range around if you like. Call, King of Hearts, right? And now it might be surprising that out of position here has to check 48% of the time on the King of Hearts, since the King here should be quite a good card for typical c-betting range. However, you need to keep in mind that out of position here bet very small on the flop. Typically these overcards are really, really good, and the c-better will follow through a lot, kind of in an imposition scenario like button versus big blind in 6-max, where you've made a large polarizing bet on the flop. If you've made it just a small bet on the flop, your range is kind of a bit more diluted, whereas if you were to take a polarizing strategy right off the bat on the flop, your range includes a whole bunch of like King Queen, King 10, King 9 type of hands that your opponent would be folding to your large bet sizing. So the King is, while a good card for out of position here, if we look at how the EV compares on different turn cards, you can see for out of position, kind of the King of Hearts is up there with, you know, a good card. The bad cards are, you know, flush bringing cards like the spade, and then low cards like 5, 4, 3, those things that give imposition more 2 pairs and sets and that kind of thing. So we get the large bet on the turn, and here LLinusLLove does have a shoving range, 10% of hands, but Queen Jack is emphatically not in it. Instead, it's mainly, you know, strong King X, like King Queen, just wants to get it in. King Jack, interestingly, slow playing, presumably because it blocks Jack X, which is part of the calling range for the c-better. So mainly, Linus should be at equilibrium, shoving in, you know, King Queen, some Ace Queen as a bluff, as well as nut flush draws, Queen 9 combo draws, that type of thing. Just slicing out that kind of range to, you know, get that fat value with the King Queen. And Queen Jack, if we look at the EV of Queen Jack, if you look to next to the Queen Jack hands on the left, it has the EVs. And next to the EVs, there's 3 numbers in blue, green, and red. And those are the raising EV, calling EV, and folding EV. And we see for Linus's hands, the Queen of Hearts, Jack of Clubs, I believe. The raising EV is negative 0.85 blinds, and the calling EV is 2.11. So it's roughly like a 3 big blind mistake here, which in terms of, you know, turn decisions isn't the end of the world. For instance, shoving here something like 10-9, which has like a bad gut shot as a bluff, that's like a negative 13 big blind mistake. So it's really quite close. But it's still not a play that would immediately occur to me to start implementing. So we'll look at a couple of reasons why LLinusLLove might be doing such a thing. And the most obvious reason is that he envisions out of position's range to be too bluff heavy or too draw heavy than equilibrium would like. So in that case, Queen Jack can be a good shove in order to deny all that equity that he's been barreling into us. As well, he might think that out of position's value range is too narrow. So if those two things are true, then out of position is in real trouble if we're shoving Queen Jack into him. So for instance, if we look at the equilibrium turn C betting range here. It includes things such as ace jack even, queen jack at some frequency, like some of these weak jacks at, some frequency, as well as some 6x and queen queen. So there's definitely a class of players, maybe not at high stakes, but there's definitely a class of players who on the king turn will not be merging that low in their C betting strategy. Making their and barreling almost all their spade draws, heart draws, things like ace queen, and against an opponent like that, it may be worthwhile to start shoving into him a whole bunch of crap, merging down very, very low into Jack X, but also including a whole bunch of draws in order to fold out a bunch of equity. So next we'll look at a node lock scenario in order to see whether we can bring out a queen jack shove out of the solver. Okay, so here's the node lock simulation from the flop. And basically I've node locked here 100% c-bet range on the flop, which is definitely something that could be happening here. It's actually most likely. So we'll work within this framework in a situation where we've c-bet 100% on the flop and LLinusLLove has flatted, king of hearts turn. And what we'll do now is play around with node locking a likely turn strategy for out of position here. So first of all, we'll put in some checks that we think out of position will select. And we'll say that, let's say out of position is checking all their Jack X. So ace jack, we'll say they're c-betting king jack still at equilibrium because it's two pair. Queen jack getting checked, as well as we'll give checks to queen queen, and just for tidiness, these pocket pairs. Now, what things might we expect to get bet above equilibrium? Let's go first to flush draws, and we'll say, what if our opponent is continuation betting all flush draws that don't have showdown value, or a pair in this case, I suppose is a better way to put it, since ace-high does have some showdown value technically. So betting all of this stuff, checking the Jack X. We'll say checking the 6x still, but 5-4 suited, all this jazz. 10-6. We'll say they check. King 7, ace king, we'll say still remains at equilibrium. Okay, cool. So all that stuff, and okay, let's see if that's good enough to bring out queen jack for a shove. So let's resolve this from the flop to the turn. Okay, that's about good. And our opponent bets here. And now, what do the EVs look like for queen jack? We can see LLinusLLove is shoving now 22% of his hands, so it's increased, roughly twofold how much he should be shoving the turn here. So it's pretty interesting. And now, looks like EV-wise, now it's still not shoving queen jack, but the EVs are getting very, very close, like within one big blind in most cases here. So still not quite a shove. So let's say our opponent is severely aggro and on the king turn is barreling a lot of ace X, thinking that the ace X is a good bluff to make because it blocks ace king, ace jack, that kind of thing. So let's say all this ace 9, ace 10 now is getting bet. So all this ace X is just getting shoved. Ace queen, we'll say that all the ace queen is getting bet too. Something like that. Something not unreasonable. Something that people may do, right? And we'll resolve that. Okay, that's about good. And here now Linus Love against that type of range. Now you can start shoving 52% of your hands. So Queen Jack finally kind of makes it in. With the Queen of Hearts, it still doesn't want to shove it in, but you know, blockers are always a tough thing, especially when you're node locking ranges, because you know the actual ranges that people are doing things might be difficult. So it's easy to impose quite severe blocker effects when you're node locking things. But quite crazy here if you have an inkling that your opponent is overbarreling this type of turn in a 3-bet pot. It behooves you to absolutely demolish him with shoving the turn here, an insane part of your range. A whole bunch of this ace X. These are all nut flush draws. So all the nut flush draws, except for like the really good ones, ace queen, it's going to get shoved in. Like all these crappy, or sorry, that's king X. Whole bunch of king X going in. Whole lot of king X going in. Whole lot of jack X getting in. Just not liking the queen jack too much for some reason. Because that queen of hearts apparently is that good, or holding a queen in general isn't that good because a lot of the turn bluffing range, I guess, is like ace queen and queen 10 and stuff like that in general. So you can shove all this 6x with a flush draw in, all these mid pocket pairs you can just rip in if you want to make a significant exploit of someone who's overbarreling, but not merging enough with their value in the process of doing so. So I suspect that this is kind of the reason why Linus is doing what he's doing. He may have additional reasons. Perhaps he has a pre-flop read on his opponent that his 3-bet range is heavily weighted towards suited hands as opposed to this offsuit region. So perhaps they're 3-betting, you know, like 25% of hands, but in constructing it, they're using a whole bunch of king X suited, queen X suited kind of thing. In that case, Linus Love can read the turn c-betting range as very, very draw heavy. Maybe not if they have a whole bunch of king X, but you know, whatever. But that you can see how that type of read might translate to a post-flop scenario like this, where you have a double suited turn. Right, so that's been another Linus Love hand. If you liked the video, please like and subscribe down below. I have kind of a Linus Love hand analysis series that I'm putting together here. So thanks for watching.